Suburbs, not always an ideal urban environment. I mean, it's kind of in the name, it's suburban. But as many of our core cities become more and more unaffordable, living in a smaller municipality in close proximity to the city you actually want to be in becomes the next best option. So today we're going to look at how the composition of our metro areas is changing, how our suburbs are changing, and we're going to count down the 10 US suburbs that have taken the most urban turn in the last decade or so. It's all coming up next. This is City Nerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always welcome. And look, it's pretty rare I do something explicitly about suburbs, not because I actively dislike them. I mean, I recently lived in one for a whole year, but because the distinction between a suburb and a city is often pretty superficial. In fact, a suburb is literally a city, so in some ways the distinction is nonsense. Like, certain Los Angeles suburbs feel more identifiably LA than parts of LA do, and this is true for lots of cities. But I'm going to entertain this idea just because the suburb writ large has this kind of exalted place in the American imagination. Manicured lawns, 3-car garages, picket fences, usually white, quote-unquote good schools, usually white. Honestly, a whole laundry list of characteristics that correlate well, not just with higher incomes, but maybe just the desire to be seen as having a higher income. But today, I'm not talking about suburbs as an abstract idea, but as what they actually are. Cities that exist inside a metropolitan area, but aren't the core city. And I just want to acknowledge that there is this narrative out there of people leaving the cities for the suburbs. Really, there's always been that narrative. So I just did a quick check myself and looked at the 25 most populous metro areas in the 2010 census and how the population changed in the 2020 census. And I looked at the same delta in the core or most populous city in each metro area. Not super scientific, but I just point out that in 14 of the 25 metro areas, the central city grew faster than the metro area as a whole, so do with that information what you will. So the question I want to get at today is, are there suburbs that, in the last decade or so, have begun to behave more like proper cities, and if so, where are they? To answer this, I grabbed commuting characteristics for every city in the US where the American Community Survey makes one-year data available, which is generally going to be cities, including suburbs, close to 100,000 population and higher, due to sample size thresholds. Normally with ACS, I like to use a 5-year rolling just for statistical significance, but the 2020 and 2021 data are so wonky, while I feel like the 2022 is maybe more reflective of a new normal. For me, this is all about behavior around car dependency, and so I did what I do. I made a formula. A bit arbitrary, as always, but I looked at the change between 2010, which is the farthest back I can get this data, and 2022, which is the latest and greatest. The metrics I looked at, and I'll show you the national numbers just to give you a baseline to think about, were low-car households, which I define as 0 or 1 car, proportion of people walking, biking, and taking transit to work, and I also included reduction in driving to work, which isn't the same thing since a lot of that reduction is due to work from home, which I still have mixed feelings about, but is probably an overall positive. Now, I'll just admit that I had some preconceived notions about the type of suburbs that were going to end up on this list. Ones with new transit service or ones that have been densifying in kind of conspicuous ways. But what you're going to find with this list is it's not that easy to interpret why cities show up here. It could be because of infrastructure or service improvements, but it could be things like more and more people getting priced out of the urban areas where they actually want to live, but bringing those urban behaviors and preferences to a close-in suburb. Call it gentrification if you want, but it's always funny to call it that when it comes from people being forced out of the central city rather than the opposite. Okay, that is the setup for this very strange list, so let's get into it. Number 10, Parma, Ohio, just outside Cleveland, the largest suburb in Ohio, I'm told, named for the Italian city of Parma, to which it bears a striking resemblance. Okay, maybe not. Honestly, Parma is a city that doesn't strike me as being that different from a lot of Cleveland in terms of urban form. Different school district, probably. The good news, driving to work is down 13 points, and the percentage of low-car households is up 8 points. It's hard to say why from a built environment standpoint. Average household size is down from 2.5 to 2.3, and that could explain a little bit of it, but household sizes are down in the US as a whole. Number 9, Mountain View, California. I'm afraid this is going to be a bit of a theme with this list. It's a city of 90,000 and its largest employer by far, Google, employs like 27,000. So you've got some demographic stuff going on here. These Silicon Valley suburbs have a lot of work from home. Driving to work is down 24 points in Mountain View and transit is down too. I still don't think Caltrain ridership is anywhere near recovering pre-pandemic numbers, but low car households are up 7 points and biking was up 1.5. Honestly, I feel like some of the big tech campuses are kind of bike friendly in some of the same ways college campuses are. Number 8, let's head south to Orange County, Irvine, California. Driving to work down 21 points, basically all attributable to work from home, and low car households up 9 points. I do wonder, are cities that are experiencing more work from home encouraging people to own fewer cars, because that does seem like a positive from a behavioral perspective, but I hesitate to say this would be a good place to live car-free. The vibe is very suburban, including the fact that if you want to walk across the street to like stock up on some adult beverages, it's not exactly going to be a direct route, but on the plus side, you might get your 10,000 steps for the day. Number 7, Richardson, Texas, relatively close into Dallas. Driving to work is down, low car households are up, that's the theme here, but walking is actually up 2 points in Richardson since 2010. A lot of the urban form in the city has big office park vibes, so I don't know if that's where the walking is happening, but check out the scene around Richardson's DART stations. The city line development seems to still be building out, and I'm guessing there are thousands of housing units in a fairly walkable environment that weren't here 10 years ago. Number 6, Scottsdale, Arizona. Man, I love a topic where I get to talk about cities I never talk about. Similar to Richardson, driving to work is way down, low car households are up 7 points, and walking is up a point. There's no doubt there are a lot of walkable places in Scottsdale. The old downtown has pretty good urban fabric intact. Fashion Square Mall is probably good for walking, but face it, you're probably driving if you want to walk in these places because there's just not much housing density. And a lot of Scottsdale looks like this. Golf resorts with, I don't know, what's a diplomatic way to put this? Density challenged residential. I'm not saying no one walks here, but the golf cart VMT is probably off the charts. Number 5, gotta go back out west, Sunnyvale, California. This is gonna be a similar deal as Mountain View, just more extreme. Driving is down 25 points, car light households are up 10, and biking is up slightly. Hard to pinpoint exactly why. Continuing influx of fit tech bros working at home, that's pretty reductive, but maybe true. Famously, the birthplace of the video game industry, so maybe the epicenter of Western decline. I'm kidding, sort of, although I basically boycotted gaming after they pulled the plug on the Sega Dreamcast. Anyway, a lot of these Silicon Valley suburbs have a corporate office park vibe, but the area around the Sunnyvale Caltrain station does seem like a place I could live car-free, if I could afford it. Number 4, let's head to the East Coast and look at Union City, New Jersey. Driving to work is down, as it is everywhere, well, at least until I get to the dishonorable mentions. Low car households are up 9 points, but walking spiked up from 10%, which is already really high, to 16%. Maybe we can call this the Hoboken effect. Union City is right next door, it is super walkable, and it actually has higher population density than Hoboken. The highest population density of any city over 50,000 in the US, actually. But my only question is, why does the bike network simply end at the city limits? Okay, in a minute, I'm gonna get to honorables, dishonorables, and a pretty interesting top 3. But first, brief reminder to engage the various screen elements if you're enjoying this tour of America's evolving suburban landscape. Connect in all the usual places. I've got a lot of travel and speaking engagements coming up in the first half of this year, and Instagram is a good way to kind of keep up with that if you want to know. Honorable mention, I did look at all cities, so my non-suburb honorable mention is St. Cloud, Minnesota, one of an extremely small number of cities where walking, biking, and transit are all up since 2010. Named for St. Cloud in the western side of Paris, St. Cloud, Minnesota isn't particularly Parisian or particularly dense, but there's solid Midwestern US urban fabric, and maybe more relevant, in the past decade, a pretty large wave of immigrants who maybe have different ideas about how to get around the city. Okay, and this isn't really a dishonorable mention, just something that was depressing. As I was going through the 2020 data, I noticed there were a lot of new cities that met the sample size threshold since 2010, but also a couple cities that dropped out, presumably due to population decline. So pour one out for Mayaguez, Puerto Rico, which is a city I've visited before, and also a city I haven't ever visited, Youngstown, Ohio. I'm not sure either of these are coming back. And the actual dishonorable mention, a city where driving is up, even with post-pandemic work from home, and everything else is down, including low-car households. It's Linwood, California. And you might be thinking, come on, it has a metro station dead center of the city, and surely they've densified all the real estate within a quarter-mile radius. Like, Richardson, Texas figured that out. Well, the DART stations in Richardson aren't right in the middle of a freeway interchange. Number 3, let's continue to make our way southeast in Silicon Valley to Santa Clara. Same dynamic and vibe as Mountain View and Sunnyvale, except Santa Clara has its own NFL team. It's just named for a city that's like 50 miles away. Low car households up 12.5 points, the highest number on this list. Average household size went from 2.77 to 2.49, which explains some of it. But I mean, I could see living a low car life here if I worked in tech, but it doesn't really feel like my vibe. Okay, I take it back. Where do I sign a lease? Number 2, back to the East Coast. This is Mount Vernon, just on the north side of the Bronx. Really interesting inclusion on this list. This is not a tech worker hotspot as far as I know, and this isn't being driven by work from home nearly as much. Transit is up 5 points from 18% to 23%, which is a really big number for a suburb. Much more working class vibe than probably any place on this list. The southern part of Mount Vernon looks like the Bronx, which is right next door, and part of the city is even in the catchment area of the terminal stations of the MTA 2 and 5 lines, while the northern part of the city starts to feel more like suburban Westchester County. Just kind of fascinating. And number 1, one final visit to Silicon Valley. Let's go to Redwood City, further up the bay. Similar dynamics as the other 3 cities we looked at, except both walking and biking are up, and transit is actually flat, which feels like being up, given the nature of the 2022 data. Redwood City does probably have the most recognizably urban downtown, and it's right on top of the Caltrain station. And if you go into Street View and play with the time slider, you're going to find that a lot of this is new since 2010, which is really the kind of thing I wanted to see when I embarked on researching this video in the first place. So my takeaway is, if every city in the Bay Area can just do something similar to this, but build it like 10 times taller and do it in a wider variety of places than like only within 2 blocks of a rail transit station, then maybe, just maybe, who am I kidding? So there were a few different dynamics in this. The continued rise of work from home, of course, but also the continued trend in smaller household sizes in the US, which isn't just a US phenomenon. The extreme version of this, I think, is China, which instituted the one-child policy in 1980. It's something I really hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about, but it is absolutely fascinating. There's a great video on this from Polymatter called The One-Child Policy, and it is so good. Lots of great historical footage, and it touches on some of the unsavory aspects of the one-child policy, but it also explores fascinating stuff like the incredible CO2 impact of the policy and the related explosion of urbanization in China over the last generation. The one-child policy from Polymatter is a Nebula original and exclusive to the platform, and it's just another example of how Nebula supports creators in tackling projects that reach a higher level of finish, like a well-polished documentary in this case. For me personally, it's a community of people who have been working in video creation for a lot longer than I have, and who I learn a ton from every day. So Nebula has been indispensable in helping my channel grow, and it's also a great platform for my content. If you're looking for history, culture, urbanism, funny game shows, all the best stuff really is here. And best of all, it is creator owned, so all of us on Nebula have a direct stake in the success of the platform. And that's why I say that when you sign up, you're really helping support all of us financially, professionally, and creatively in a long-term structural way. So if you want to support this channel's ability to continue to grow and reach more people, signing up for Nebula is a great way to do that. And just so you're aware, this video did get released to Nebula Nebula a few days early, so if you want to move your viewing schedule up, this is probably going to be a recurring feature throughout 2024 for me. So if you sign up for Nebula using my custom link down in the description, you will get everything Nebula has to offer. The usual content, but often ahead of the schedule you're used to. And on top of that, all of the originals and all of the classes, all for just $250 a month, which is 40% off the usual price. It's a fantastic value, and you'll be supporting this channel in a really deep structural way. And if you were watching on Nebula, you'd be seeing a version of this video that doesn't have a promo in it. I'm just saying. And that's all I got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks as always to the patrons, whose direct support really gives me the freedom to do whatever I want to do week after week, which I think makes this channel what it is, for better or worse. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.